I have to share something with you. I recently just went to my first play party in Mexico, and while I was there, I met a bunch of people who had literally flown in that morning just for the party, and they were flying out the next day. And I was like, wait a minute. There's a whole new level of commitment here, and that's when it hit me. We need to talk about something that's quietly becoming a thing. It's called pleasure travel. And no, it's not the same thing as sex tourism. And no, it's not just people being reckless. It's actually more layered than that. Now, I travel a lot. And if you're new here, my name is Allie. Hello. I am a sex education student with the Sexual Health Alliance. And on this channel, we have some casual conversations about sex, relationships, and other fun stuff. And I love coming on here and sharing with you all the interesting things I'm learning about my body, sex, and relationships, and also what I'm learning about sex and culture. Now, I don't travel specifically for sex, but let's be honest, it's part of my narrative. If I'm in a city, I'm probably Googling things like local kink events, dating norms, sex culture, adult nightlife, how people connect there. It's really fascinating for me. And recently, I asked my Patreon community what kind of content they want more of in 2026. I honestly thought they were all gonna say more spicy personal stories, but nope, the highest rated answer was sex, culture, travel, and dating norms across the world. So clearly, you are all very interested in what sex looks like globally, and honestly, the same. I'm actually coming at you right now from my hotel room in Bangkok, Thailand, and let me tell you, there is a lot of stuff to learn here. But we won't get into that specifically in this video. We're gonna dive into what pleasure travel actually is, why more people are doing it, the psychology behind it, the benefits, the risks, and how this fits into the bigger picture of sex and culture. But before we get into all that, I want to define something first. So you may have heard of the term sex tourism. And before we spiral, let me just clarify something, okay? Here's the research-based definition of sex tourism. When researchers and public health organizations talk about sex tourism, they're usually referring to travel where sexual experiences are part of the intention. That definition by itself isn't automatically exploitative. It simply describes the motivation. Now, where it becomes harmful is when it overlaps with trafficking, coercion, or anything involving minors, which are crimes everywhere. And in this video, I'm talking strictly about consensual adult experiences and the broader cultural shift towards what some are calling pleasure travel. Now, that's important to note because trafficking does not equal consensual adult travel, and sleeping with minors is a crime everywhere. We're not talking about that. We're talking about consenting adults who intentionally incorporate sexuality into travel. Pleasure travel feels like a bit of an evolution to this. It's less about buying sex abroad and more about things like erotic festivals, play parties, swinger resorts, kink conventions, destination dating, which is a new term I heard recently, which has a really nice ring to it, erotic retreats, or just plain old sex-positive cultural exploration. So it's curated, it's intentional, and it's community-based. I mean, I go on sex culture trips that are planned and organized by my school, the Sexual Health Alliance, just to learn about this stuff. We've been to Amsterdam, Prague, Iceland, Barcelona, Berlin. The best part is these trips are for everyone, not just for people enrolled in the program. So if you are interested in that kind of thing and curious about sex culture across the world, I highly recommend you check it out. And I'm gonna put that link in the description below. But let's look at what the data actually says, because yes, it's not just about the vibes. There is some scientific data about this topic. So there was a large meta-analysis, and they found that about 20% of international travelers report casual sex abroad. And the CDC travel health reports estimate between 20 and 34% of male travelers that engage in casual sex while traveling. Now, nearly half of those encounters do involve inconsistent protection. I'll get into later on in this video how to stay safe while traveling later in this video. I found another study that is a cross-sectional study of backpackers traveling in Bangkok, and they found that 25% has casual sex during their trip. And if we look at the psychology behind it, why does including pleasure during travel sound so enticing? I mean, I feel like it should be obvious, no? You got novelty, which increases your dopamine. You know, you're in a new place, everything is all exciting. You're on vacation, so you got lower stress levels, which increase your libido. And you're also somewhere where nobody knows you. And that anonymity lowers your inhibition and lets you kind of be a little bit freer, a little bit of a different version of yourself, and have a little fun. Travel literally shifts your brain chemistry. You're in a new environment. Nobody knows you. Your identity feels flexible. Your routine is gone. Of course, your desire shifts. So why are people now flying specifically for pleasure events? I think it's a few things. You guys can let me know if you agree or disagree or add in your own thoughts here. So we have digital communities. So we have kink communities, poly communities, lifestyle groups, and people can now coordinate globally, you know, with the internet all across the world. So you don't just stumble into these things, you actually research it, you book it, and so on. Then we have delayed marriage and sexual autonomy. So people are single longer, or they're redefining relationships. People aren't having as many children. People have a little bit more disposable income and are traveling a little bit more. Pleasure's becoming less taboo and more integrated. And then we have a burnout culture. We all know burnout, right? And people aren't looking just for relaxation anymore. They want aliveness. They want to feel something. They want to do something different. And pleasure travel often offers that intensity. And finally, we have plain old cultural curiosity. I mean, sex is culture. Dating norms in Mexico are not the same as Thailand. Swinging culture in Europe is not the same as North America. So for some people, exploring intimacy is part of exploring the world. Now let's get into the benefits here, all right? Because there are several. One being exploration without hometown reputation, right? In your hometown, everyone knows you. People have certain biases towards you or judgments, but in a new space, you can be whoever you want to be. And then you have intentional erotic environments. So spaces that are curated specifically to try out some erotic adventures in a safe way. You can meet like-minded adults, and that alone is just so great. You can experience different cultural attitudes towards sexuality, and this one can be particularly and incredibly liberating for most people, especially if you come from a purity culture back in the West. Pleasure travel just reignites your libido, whether you're a solo person or whether you're in a couple. And speaking of couples, sheer novelty increases the bonding hormones. Travel already boosts your connection, and if you add consensual erotic play to that, for some couples, that is powerful. Now, my partner and I have definitely felt many of the benefits while participating in fun, consensual sexual activities abroad and alone as well, because, you know, I've traveled by myself quite a bit and have had my own experiences. I do share many of these experiences on my Patreon, so if you want to support the channel and learn more about sex and culture, you can check it out. I'm gonna link it below. But with benefits, always come risks. So here's the other side. You have the potential of higher STI exposure rates. So this is very clearly stated in the research. In nearly all studies on sex and travel, inconsistent condom use is an issue. And one of the reasons for that is risk-taking due to alcohol and novelty. You're drinking, you're somewhere new, it's fun and exciting, and like this is a lethal combination. When you drink, your inhibitions go down, and it's just no bueno. It's not a good look, you know? What other risks? You have legal differences across countries, cultural misunderstandings, you gotta be careful, you have ethical gray areas, you know, if you're not informed. And just because something is normalized in one country doesn't mean it's safe, legal, or ethical. For example, you know, in Thailand, even though things pretty much have sex everywhere, like you walk around, it's like sex, 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 sex. Not everywhere, but you know, it can be pretty loud in some places. Sex work is still very much illegal here. Also, consent standards vary culturally. So, you know, at the end of the day, pleasure travel requires maturity and research beforehand if you are going to engage in some of these activities. But if you do, how can you stay safe during pleasure travel? Now, let's talk about the practical side of things. If you're going to blend travel and sexuality, casually, intentionally, whatever you want, you need to approach it like an adult. So here are just some tips that I've done myself or that I've read that I thought were a good idea that could potentially help you, but always do your own research. The first one, mucho importante, know your testing window. If you are sexually active while traveling, understand the incubation period for STIs. So testing the day you land home doesn't always give accurate results because some infections take weeks to show up. In that case, you could consider testing abroad. But do your research first. Not all clinics are equal. Look for internationally accredited clinics, travel health clinics, or recommended clinics on Facebook groups and so on. I personally have tested the medical system in a few places in the world, specifically Mexico and Thailand, and I will say a little bit more efficient than it is back home in Canada. So you have many private labs. Again, do your research, but you can also go to a hospital or whatever. It's accessible, it's affordable, and it's quick. You don't have to make appointments way ahead of time. The fees are not so high. You can get results within 24, 48 hours sent as PDFs to your WhatsApp. Like, it's just a great system, friends. It's a lot more efficient than it is back home, I'll say that much. But you also have to understand confidentiality laws in other countries that you're in as well. Then, of course, we have protection. Bring your own. Condom standards vary, availability varies. Don't just rely on, I'll just find someone I get there, because chances are when you're in the situation, you might not find a condom around. And especially if you've been drinking, inhibitions go out the window and you say, fuck it. And that one time can really mess you up. So just be careful with that. And then know your laws. So age of consent varies, sex work laws vary, public indecency laws vary, what's normal socially isn't always legal. And again, I'm gonna circle back to alcohol because I think this is a big one. Be sober enough to consent. And not just sober enough to consent, but sober enough to accept consent and understand consent when it's given to you from somebody else. If you wasty pants, you're trying to get it on and someone is clearly like not giving you an enthusiastic yes, but you're so fucked up that you can't tell, oof, my friend, that is not a good situation to be in. And like I said before, the novelty of like being away and on vacation and new city, new people, plus drinking, it's a powerful mix. So just be careful with that. And finally, we have vet events and communities. So if you're attending a party or a festival, think about things like, is there a consent policy? Is there security? Is there a vetting process? Intentional spaces are usually well organized, but you never know. Again, some of these things might not seem obvious to you. So for this one, for example, in terms of vetting communities and parties and such, when I went to that first play party in Mexico, when I heard about it, I knew I wanted to go. And I was like, I'm gonna go anyways, whether or not Gab, my partner, comes with me or not. So I was telling a friend about it. I said, oh, I'm going to this party. And she said, oh, is Gab going with you? And I said, no, but well, I don't know. Like, I'm gonna go. I haven't asked him yet, but if he doesn't wanna go, I still wanna go. And then she asked me all these questions, like, make sure it's consent-based, make sure it's this, make sure it's that. And I was like, oh, I was just gonna like go. Like, it seemed okay, but there are things that I didn't even think about. And Gab did end up coming with me, and it ended up being a great consent-driven party and so on. But I was kind of naively going into it. I was like, oh, it's gonna be a cool experience and whatever, but it could have turned out to be really ugly. And had I been alone, like, who knows what would have happened. So if you're traveling with friends, make sure that you have Google location sharing on, make sure people know where you are, make sure you have a check-in process and things like that. So yeah, pleasure travel can be empowering, but empowerment requires information. Going back to the play party in Mexico and meeting people who literally flew in for a single night, I realized something. These people aren't reckless. They planned it. They vetted the situation, they communicated boundaries, and that's different from the stereotype of like wild vacation hookup. While those can still be fun, okay, I've had a few good ones, it's more intentional. People are planning erotic experiences the way others plan food tours, yoga retreats, music festivals, and pleasure is becoming a part of the itinerary. And for me personally, I don't travel for sex, but I do travel with curiosity. And if sexuality is a part of the culture and culture is part of travel, then of course I'm interested. And clearly, you are too. Before we wrap this up, friends, I just want to say something clearly. Okay, I want to circle back to the whole sex tourism thing. Now, sex tourism, it's complicated, okay? It's layered. It intersects with economics, global inequality, migration, labor laws, morality, and culture. And in this video, I'm not condemning it, but I'm also not endorsing it. I'm saying we need to understand it better because it's not going anywhere, all right? There are entire systems that allow it to exist. You got tourism infrastructure, global income disparities, digital platform, visa policies, and so on. And if we're gonna talk about it honestly, the conversation has to include worker protection, legal structures, consent standards, harm reduction, and the voices of the workers themselves. Remember, trafficking is abuse, minors are illegal, and coercion is criminal. but consensual adult sex work exists in many countries, and collapsing everything into one narrative doesn't help anyone. I mean, come on, friends. Sex work is literally the oldest job in the world. It's not going anywhere, okay? It's not going anywhere. And there are ethical ways people choose to engage, and there are also exploitative ways. And unpacking that deserves its own full conversation and its own video one day. But today was about pleasure travel. But we can't forget that the broader ecosystem matters. So maybe the real question isn't, are people traveling for sex now? Maybe it's, haven't they always? And we're just talking about it openly? I'm curious where you fall. Would you ever travel specifically for an erotic event, dating in another culture, a play party, maybe a sensual retreat? Ah, that sounds good, sensual retreat. Or does that all feel out of your comfort zone? Let's talk about it, okay? Because clearly sex, travel, and culture are deeply intertwined, and you have all made that very clear. And you want to explore that with me. That's it, my friends. If you want to support the Sex Positive channel, you want to learn more about sex and culture and my sex education journey, you can do so by clicking on the link to my Patreon below. You can get in touch with me there. And I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one. Besos. Adios.